So today, we're diving into a story of pure survival. This isn't your typical story about kings and crowns. It's brutal, it's bloody, and it's about how one man, Herod, didn't just inherit a kingdom. He had to forge one, piece by agonizing piece, through violence, betrayal, and just devastating loss. I mean, it's the classic question, right? We like to think it's all about grand battles or brilliant diplomacy, but for this guy, Herod, the path to power was something else entirely. It was a desperate, ugly scramble in a world that had been set on fire. Because this story isn't about fancy political moves. It's about what happens when all the rules break down, when order completely collapses, and the only thing that matters anymore is violence. This is how a man loses everything, and somehow, through all that, ends up winning the ultimate prize. Okay, so where does all this kick off? Well, it starts with the murder that quite literally shook the world. Julius Caesar is dead, the Roman Republic is shattered, and this massive power vacuum just rips across all of its provinces. And down in Judea, that chaos? Well, that's an opportunity. And you better believe the wolves are starting to circle. Marching right into the middle of all this is Cassius, one of Caesar's assassins. He shows up in Syria with his army, and he has one immediate demand: a, frankly, insane tribute of 700 talents of silver. Herod's father, a guy named Antipater, who's the local governor, he's just scrambling to pay up, because he knows if he fails, it means death and slavery for his people. So while Herod's dad is trying to scrape together this Roman cash, a local rival, this guy Malichus, he sees his opening. He sees Herod's family as just one more obstacle in his way. So, at a feast, pretending to be a friend, he has Antipater poisoned. He wants to take his main competitor right off the board, permanently. Now for Herod, you gotta understand, this isn't just politics anymore. This is personal. His father has just been murdered. But he can't just lash out. Cassius is still the one with the army, the one with the real power. So Herod, he has to be smart. He has to be patient. He has to play the long game and just wait for that perfect moment to get his revenge. And right here, this is where we get the first real glimpse of how cunning Herod can be. He doesn't go raise a mob. No. Instead, he goes to the Roman tribunes, working for Cassius, and convinces them that Malichus is a threat to Rome. They're the ones who lure Malichus down to the seashore near Tyre, where, under Roman authority, he's surrounded and cut to pieces. It's not a street brawl. It's a cold, calculated political hit. Okay, so time moves on. Cassius is out of the picture, and the new big shot in the east is Mark Antony. A bunch of Jewish leaders rush to him, and they accuse Herod and his brother Phasaelus of being violent tyrants. But Antony, he remembers that their father was loyal to Rome. He just brushes off the complaints, and in a move that basically rewards Herod for being so decisive, he actually promotes the brothers. He makes them joint rulers. They're called tetrarchs, over all of Judea. So Herod's on top, right? He's finally a ruler. But in a world this chaotic, power, well, it's not built to last. Just when he thinks he's made it, an outside force is about to come crashing in and completely shatter his entire world. And bam! Just like that, the Parthian Empire, Rome's biggest enemy in the east, comes storming across the border. And they've brought along their own candidate to be king of Judea, a guy named Antigonus. He's the last heir of the old royal family, and he sees this invasion as his one and only shot to take back his family's throne from Herod. Now, Antigonus and the Parthians, they don't play fair. They pretend they want to have peace talks, and they lure Herod's brother Phasaelus and the High Priest Hyrcanus right into their camp. Of course, it's a trap. They're both seized, they're tied up, and they're handed over to Antigonus. And what happens next? Honestly, it's the brutal, emotional heart of this entire story. I mean, this just shows you the sheer, raw brutality of the time. Phasaelus knows he's a dead man. But with his hands bound, he refuses to give his enemy the satisfaction of killing him. So instead, he kills himself. He smashes his own head against a rock. At the same time, Antigonus carries out this act of grotesque personal revenge. He literally bites off Hyrcanus's ears to make absolutely sure he can never serve as high priest ever again. So when Herod gets word of this betrayal, he knows it's over. Jerusalem is lost. In the dead of night, he gathers his family, his mother, his sister, his fiancée Mariamne, and he runs. And as they're trying to get away, they get attacked. And not just by the Parthians. They're fighting off their own countrymen, people who now see Herod as nothing more than a puppet for Rome.
So let's just take stock here. Herod is now a fugitive in his own country. His brother is dead, his allies have been captured, and his family is on the run. He has absolutely nothing. And it's from this point of total desperation that he makes the single biggest, most insane gamble of his entire life.
I mean, just look at where he is. He manages to get his family to safety in the desert fortress of Masada. Then he runs to Arabia for help and gets turned away. He is a wanted man. He's broke. He's no friends left. His only hope is Rome. So he gets on a ship and sails directly into a deadly winter storm, risking absolute certain death just for a tiny chance to plead his case.
And what happens in Rome? Well, it's something nobody could have predicted. Herod shows up looking like a desperate refugee. He gets a meeting with Antony and the young Octavian, the guy who will become Emperor Augustus. And he's not even asking for the crown for himself. He's asking for help for a relative. But Antony, he has a much bigger idea. He stands up in the Senate and says that in this war against Parthia, Rome needs a loyal, strong king in Judea, and he proposes Herod. And just like that, the Roman Senate votes yes, unanimously. Herod, the guy who was a penniless fugitive just days before, sleeping in the desert, he walks out of that building a king, literally flanked by the two most powerful men in the world. He has the title, but he doesn't have a kingdom. And now, he has to go back and take it by force. But look, a title from Rome is just a piece of paper, right? You need an army to make it real. The Herod that returns to Judea is not the same man who left. He's not a governor anymore. He is a king at war, and he is ready to do whatever it takes to get his land back. He lands, he fights his way south, and he relieves his family who were under siege at Masada. Once they're safe, he turns his attention to Galilee. You see, he's got rebels hiding out in these caves, carved right into these sheer cliff faces. You can't attack them from the top, you can't get at them from the bottom, so what do?
So what's his solution?
Well, it's pure, terrifying, brutal ingenuity. He builds these huge wooden chests. He fills them with his toughest soldiers, and then he has them lowered down the cliffs on ropes. And from there, his soldiers just use these long hooked poles to literally drag the rebels out of the caves and send them falling to their deaths below. But the resistance he was up against, it was just as extreme. Our source tells this horrifying story of an old man trapped in a cave with his wife and 7 children. Herod himself calls out and offers to spare his life. But instead, the man kills his entire family, one by one, throwing their bodies off the cliff before jumping to his own death, choosing annihilation over surrender. This is the kind of hatred that's now greeting the new king. And you know what? As brutal as it was, it worked. He crushed the rebellion in Galilee. He proved to his Roman patrons that he was exactly what they paid for, a ruthless, effective client king who could bring a violent border under control. He proved his value to Rome through sheer, efficient slaughter. And so that brings us to the end of this chapter of his life. Herod has the crown he never, ever expected to wear. He survived betrayal, he survived an invasion, he survived exile. He outmaneuvered and outfought every single one of his enemies. But in doing all that, he lost his brother, he lost his allies, and he lost any chance of being loved or even accepted by the very people he now ruled. And that's the great paradox of Herod, isn't it? He won. He clawed his way to a kingdom through sheer force of will, but it was a kingdom founded on the ghosts of his own family and the bitter hatred of a civil war. And this brutal beginning would define his entire life, a reign that, from the very beginning, was built not on a throne, but on a tomb.